Welcome to the Expert Speaker Podcast. We're joined live with our community of expert speakers and Hall of Fame professional speaker, Mark Black, CSP. Are you in the Speaking Hall of Fame also, Mark?
I'm not. No, I'm not. Someday, hopefully.
Okay, you're in my personal Hall of Fame.
Well, that's nice. That's nice of you.
There I was sitting in the audience watching this man hold an audience of 500 people in the palm of his hand as he told the story of his lung transplant and his heart transplant. When the doctors say he might never do much again, he said, "No, thank you. I'm running a marathon." And he's just an absolute professional. And we were speaking just the other day. He's on a plane going from one speaking engagement to another speaking engagement to another speaking engagement. And I said, "Mark, how do you do it? How do you book in all these speaking gigs?" And he started telling me, and I said, "Stop. We got to get my clients in on this. We got to get my audience in on this because this is solid gold." So for those of you wondering, how does one book speaking engagement after speaking engagement after speaking engagement, charging $5, $10, $15,000 per gig? Mark's here to share the wisdom. Knowing Mark for over 10 years, I will be able to point out the fact that it's probably not an overnight, but he's probably going to give you some advice today. It's going to save many years. He's also launching his new book, Resiliency Roadmap, which is also, I believe, the new keynote that's making the rounds on the speaking circuit.
Correct.
So feel free to chat into the chat as we are here. And if you're watching this live stream somewhere, comment on the live stream. I'm sure we'll get back to it. And if you are listening to the podcast, make sure to follow and subscribe to whatever Mark is doing because he's got a lot of wisdom for you. Today, our focus is how do we book more speaking engagements and get paid for them? So Mark, how'd you get started in the speaking business and what advice do you have for new speakers?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So let me give a couple of caveats here. First of all, I do a 10-week coaching program around this. So I'm going to try and summarize 10 weeks of content for you in whatever we have here, a half hour, 45 minutes. But that said, I know I can give you some tangible strategies in this short time that then hopefully you can expand upon. I think let's start with a couple of things. Number one, as you alluded to, Majeed, it's a process, right? So yes, I do something like 40 events a year, give or take, and I do them between $5,000 and $10,000 depending on the speech and the client. But I started with one paid speech for 100 kids for $50 in a high school gym. So you got to start somewhere, right? And also gave a lot of freebies to Rotary clubs and things like that, and had lots of, what do they call it, the rubber chicken dinner circuit I did for a while. So I say that not because you need to necessarily put yourself through all of that long journey. Hopefully you can skip some of those steps that I took. But it's not an overnight. It's certainly not an overnight process, and I'm sure that you all realize that already. So that's step one. Number two, table stakes are that you're good. And maybe that's blatantly obvious, but I'm not sure that it is. I think one of the things I see a lot in the speaking industry today is that there are a lot of folks out there who are telling people who want to be speakers some of the things I'm going to tell you today about the tools and strategies for marketing yourself well and selling yourself well, all of which you need to be able to do. But at the end of the day, if what you're selling isn't that good, then it's always going to be a struggle. So before we begin anything, let's start with the fact that the content that you're delivering has to be valuable in some way. Now, value is in the eye of the beholder. So there are lots of different ways to be valuable. Entertainment has value. So if you are the motivational, inspirational speaker, that can work, but there better be some tangible takeaways for people to take from that. If you are a more tactical person and you have a process that you want to teach, so much the better. You're going to have things that people can actually walk away with and learn. If you have something that you can teach people that they can monetize quickly, so much the better, because then it's a lot easier for them to see the ROI. But at the end of the day, you also, how you do that matters. So the content is important, clearly, but the delivery of the content also matters. If you're super boring and bland, it's not going to work. So I'm taking for granted that you are working on the craft of delivering the presentation. Obviously, we're all starting somewhere, and hopefully we're getting better every time. I've been doing this for 18 years. I'm still striving to get better all the time. I'm still watching my videos and cringing at things, going, "Oh, I need to fix that." So assume we're always working on the craft. That said, how do we get more opportunities to do it? So
Let me jump in for a second, Mark.
yeah,
Quick recap. First, there's a term you used that I think I've been misunderstanding my entire speaking career, and that was the rubber chicken. And I always imagined like one of those
rubber chickens.
because there's this term called the rubber chicken circuit, which is like it's an old speaking term. It says like you're going to give free speeches at churches and Rotary clubs, and that's kind of like you're doing your dues. You got to do like 100 of these like crappy speeches. That's called the rubber chicken circuit. I never imagined that it was a rubber chicken dinner, because that makes more sense because you're eating the same bland chicken at the next Rotary Club dinner. So thank you for that.
Yeah, sure.
And I think the insight there is be prepared to do a lot of speeches that are not stadiums of people paying you $20,000. Be prepared to do a lot of speeches. Number one. Number two is you got to be good, which you went on to say you got to be entertaining and content has value. My question for you, Mark, is how do you know if you're good? Because I think as entrepreneurs, we kind of have to pump ourselves up a little bit and look ourselves in the mirror and say, you're freaking awesome.
Right.
Like, what are the indications that you're good?
So I think the gold standard is you get asked to speak somewhere else. So I forget the mentor that gave me that line. So by the way, everything I'm going to teach you today, somebody else taught me, but I came up with none of this on my own. This is an amalgamation of things I've learned from books and other people. And
Jane Atkinson said, if you're not getting three more speaking requests every time you speak, your speech isn't good enough. That's a great measure. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, 3 is ambitious, and it varies based on the audience, obviously. But yeah, the principle is, if you're not at least getting people coming up after you afterwards asking you how they can bring you to their organization, then your speech probably needs work. And frankly, I would say I never stop working on it. So to say, okay, I'm arrived in here and I'm good, and now I just kind of coast, you can do that. I wouldn't recommend it. So
and we're getting the question, how do you get good if you're not good yet?
Yeah, I know of no other way than speak. The best way to get better at speaking is to speak. So now, listen, can you practice? Yes. Can you and should you plan your presentation ahead of time? Absolutely. And what that looks like, I mean, we can dive deep into that if you like, but what that looks like is, in my opinion, different for each person. So some people need to essentially script the presentation, and it works for them. They can memorize, or at least remember well enough, and they can map out like line by line almost what they're going to say. I'm not that way at all. I need to have an outline so I know where I'm going. But if I try and get down to like the minutia of which word I'm going to say, I'm going to stress myself out, and it's not going to work. But you need to know where you're going, right? You need to know what the content is going to be. And yes, you need to do some dry runs on your own, but nothing replaces reps in front of live audiences, because it's only when you do that that you know what lands and what doesn't land. That line that you think is going to be funny may flop. You may also discover content that is funny or is powerful or is whatever, that you kind of, it's there but you don't think it's all that important, and all of a sudden with feedback you go, oh, okay, that's what they really like, I need to do more of that. So it's reps, it's repetitions, it's
so planning, preparing, and for some people even scripting, practicing, delivering. You use the term dry run, which is like a theater term for like performing it without the audience, before the audience. Yep. And then there's something else that you mentioned, which is that you were mentioning how you watch your video and you cringe a little bit. This is a very challenging thing to do. It's like torture to watch yourself give a talk, but the pros do it. And Mark, I'm curious, what is your process for reviewing speeches? Are you sitting and watching with a notepad? Are you pausing? How are you reviewing your own speech? And is that a part of your continuous improvement process?
Yeah, I highly recommend it. And I'll be completely transparent. I haven't done it in a little while, but I highly recommend it. And the best, I think, way to do it is you actually go through it 3 times. So go through it once on fast forward and mute. And you're doing that to watch how you move on stage. And that's where you're going to pick up if you happen to have some strange repetitive like motion that you always do. Not I'm not a tick, but like I really pace. Like if you have it on fast forward and you're doing this, which many people do, it'll be immediately apparent. So I watch it silently on fast forward on mute. Then I listen to it without kind of paying attention to the visual because I really want to tune into how am I speaking, how many filler words like the one I just used are in there. And I don't look, the different people have different philosophies. Folks in Toastmasters and some others who are really sticklers for that will really get on you about ums and ahs. And sure, we don't want to be wasting people's time with a lot of that, but I also think we're in an age today versus 10 years ago for sure, because of YouTube, because of Facebook Live, because of a lot of other things. People are accustomed to that. And if you are too polished, I actually think that can work against you because I think it comes off as inauthentic. So there's some happy medium there. I don't to each their own in terms of where that is. But you can watch that for, am I rambling? Do I have a lot of filler words? Am I repeating myself? Those kinds of things. And then you can watch it a third time and watch the whole thing and watch for, do the ideas flow together? Does it make sense? Does where I think I'm taking them on this journey actually translate to the person who doesn't know what's going on in my head? Because sometimes what happens for those of us who are storytellers, for example, is we've forgotten an element of the story that we know. And so in our head, the story makes sense. But to the person who doesn't know all the details, it's like, well, what happened to that person? You forgot to tell us, or where did that character come from? Or you left in the middle of that point and didn't come back to it, or whatever. And you figure that out by, again, watching video. And I say it's painful because I don't know anybody that likes to watch themselves on video. I also don't know anybody that likes to listen to their own voice on recording. We all sound differently when we hear our voice recorded versus how we hear ourselves in our head. And most people are uncomfortable with that. But it's the dealing with that discomfort is the only way I know to get better. So we're working on that while we're doing that. And so I've already said to get better at speaking, you need to speak. Okay, so we have this chicken and egg problem, right? Of like, to get more bookings, I need to be good, but to get good, I need to speak. So how do I do this? And that's why I think there is value in accepting free or low fee engagements when you're starting. I believe also highly, and I suspect Majeed is already talking to you about like placing high value on your expertise and charging what you're worth and working on your mindset if you don't think you're worth very much and all of that stuff, which is important. So it's both and here, not either or. But understanding that there may be times when it makes sense for you to speak for free or for low fee, either because you want this experience in front of a larger audience than you've had before, or in front of a great target audience that you might not be able to access otherwise, whatever the case may be. And again, putting in the reps. So I'm speaking for 7,500 typically now to typically an audience of 300-400 people, although I'll happily speak to 40 people if you got the check. But I did something like 400 or 500 speeches, mostly to middle school and high school students for between 750 and $1,200. And while most people are not going to want to do that, it was the best training ground in the world, because if you can hold the attention of 500 middle schoolers for an hour, then you can talk to anybody. And it teaches you, again, what works and what doesn't. They are incredibly unforgiving. So they forced me to figure out how to vary my delivery, vary my content in ways to make sure that it was engaging enough that they weren't gonna fall asleep on me or start talking or do whatever, because they're just not polite like adults are. And so it forces you to figure it out.
Mark, do you have experience paying to speak somewhere? Like paying to get in front of an audience?
So you'll see you will see opportunities, pay to play opportunities for speaking. And I've done a little bit of that. And again, to each their own. I'm not going to say that you should do it or that you shouldn't do it, other than I think you should discriminate carefully about when you think it makes sense. And the same with free. Now, if you're first starting, I think free is rarely a bad idea. When I say starting, I mean starting like you've never done this. So if you've already done it, then that probably doesn't apply to you. Um, well, if you're going to pay, then you want to really have a pretty good sense that you're going to be able to monetize that in some way. Now, that may not be directly like you're going to get a paid gig from it, but you're going to get a great video out of it, or you're going to get great feedback from it because it's, a speaker slam event or something like that, where you're going to get some expertise, expert feedback afterwards, or it's in front of your target market and you have some other product or service that you sell and you're going to be able to make money on the back end. And so getting in front of these people is kind of like a paid advertisement. And so you're going to make your money that way. But be careful, because there are also lots of folks out there offering opportunities to speak. That's really a money-making opportunity for them, but not necessarily a whole lot of ROI for you. And so I kind of push back against that, because I think, if you have value to add in what you do, and I think you all do, then you shouldn't be giving it away. There should be some sort of quid pro quo in this arrangement. Majeed, I'm seeing comments or questions up here. Do we want to go into those, or do you want me to let you guide this conversation?
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Let's say you take someone on this call right now and you book a flight, you go to their house and you say, we're going to lock a room. We're going to sit in a room with the door locked until we book 10 speaking engagements. Okay. What are the steps that you would take to go from 0 to 10 speaking engagements booked?
Okay, so here's the process that we use, and this may not be exactly what you're looking for, because I don't know that you'd sit in a locked room until it was done. But because my sales cycle and yours may vary, but I'm speaking primary. So it depends on your market. My market is primarily professional associations. So for context, for those of you not aware, in North America, there are something like 30,000 professional associations of various kinds. There's an association for groups of people you don't even know associate. And most of them have annual events. Many of those events need speakers. Many of those events need paid speakers. So there are literally thousands of opportunities every single year to speak to these associations. That's where I do most of my work. You can also work in corporate world doing in-house events for companies. You can also speak in schools in the education market. I consider those kind of separate buckets, if you like, and I spend most of my time in the association market. And so what my marketing system looks like, and it is a system, and I think that's really important, is we have a 3 email sequence that goes out, and I now have a virtual assistant who helps me, first of all, source the leads. So we actually go through association websites, figure out when their conference. The nice thing about associations, by the way, versus say a company, is when they're having their event is public knowledge. It's posted on their website. Their annual convention dates are posted on their website. The contact person, usually the executive director or the meeting planner, typically that information also available on their website. And so with some research, and it's just a lot of hunting and pecking and time, you can outsource that to a VA if you have the resources to do that, or you can do it yourself. But you can build yourself a database, a pretty targeted list of events with dates and contact name and contact email. And so as you do that, then you start the process of reaching out. And we do a 3 email sequence. The first email, and this is through trial and error and re-engineering and tweaking, our first email is 2 lines long. So when I started, I would send out a 3-paragraph email about, this is Mark Black, and here's what he does, and here's the program title and the description and why you should book him. And what we learned was, if this person that you're reaching out to does not know you from a hole in the ground, giving them all of this information makes it really easy for them to go, no, click, like, don't have time for this, delete, move on. Conversely, our first email now is quick question. That's the subject line. And the email says, hi, so-and-so, we see that you have an annual convention on such and such a date. Do you book professional speakers for your conference? Question mark, end of email. That's it. And by doing that, our response rate like quadrupled. Now, a lot of those responses are no, That's fine. That's still a win because it saves us from trying to market to this event that's never going to book a paid speaker. And many events are like that. They only source their own members and they don't pay their speakers. And so unless they're a target market for you for some other reason because you have coaching or something else, you probably don't want to waste your time with them. But many others will say, yes, we do. Here's when we start looking for them, etc. But by asking a one-line email and a question, more of the emails got opened and far more of them got responses. And there's something about that open loop of asking a question that kind of prompts people to want to respond. So that's the first email. The second email, if they don't respond to us, is hey, just like quick reminder, we're out wondering about this. So we send them two emails. If we don't get a response, the third one, we just go, okay, like wrong email address. We put them back in the pile to research, find a new email. If they respond back, yes, we do, or no, we don't. Well, if no, we don't, we cross them off. Yes, we do. Great. If they tell us when they book speakers, great. If they don't, the follow-up is, okay, great. When do you start looking for next year? Because you'll find the timelines are varied. Majeed, I don't know if you're finding this, but like pre-COVID, a typical association will be somewhere in the 6 to 12 month range, depending on the size of the group. Today, those timelines are shorter. Big national associations are still usually 9 to 12 months out, but others are 3, 6, 2 sometimes. So knowing that is huge because then we can put a note in our calendar or our CRM to say, hey, reach out to this organization on this date for their next conference. And I'll be honest, like, you would be shocked at the number of times you will book something mostly because you hit the person at the right time, because they're in speaker search mode when you reach out versus it's not on their radar until 6 months from now. And you'll get the standard response, which is, we will put you on file, which rarely means anything other than we'll archive your email and probably never look at it again. So hitting them at the right time is crucial. And so keeping track of that becomes really important. And then if it's a warm enough lead that we think it's worthwhile, we'll send them a thank you note saying, hey, thanks for considering us. And we also follow up with a speaker package. And we can go into what that looks like. But essentially, it's a 4 or 5 page PDF that gives them some information and a link to a demo video that is 3 or 4 minutes long that gives them a little flavor for what we do. And that's essentially the process. And then if we get further down the line of they're interested, usually you get shortlisted. You're on the list with 3, 4 other people. In associations, that's usually a committee that makes that decision. In a corporation, it might be one person. And then you either get a yes or a no. And if you get a yes, great, we're going to go do the gig. If we get a no, we're going to put them back in the cycle and make sure that we market to them again next year. Because I also can't tell you the number of times that a no turned into a yes the year after, or the year after, or the year after, because it would just, the theme wasn't right, wasn't the right time, whatever. But they liked you, and you don't want to lose track of who those people are. So one of the big takeaways I hope you get from today in terms of marketing yourself as a speaker is you need to have a CRM of some kind, CRM being customer relationship management software. There's a bunch of them out there. Many of them are free or very low cost. I use Zoho, which I think is like $50 a month. I ran my business for years with my calendar and an email inbox, and it was a mess. And I lost track of a ton of leads that could have converted if we had had a system for staying in touch with those people. I've rambled for a long time. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think a spreadsheet is a big step up from nothing.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
And I would caution anybody to get too mesmerized by bells and whistles of like these fancy super machine CRMs. Start with a list, reach out, follow up. What we advise to get started is spreadsheet, and then write down the first time you reached out, write down the second time you reached out, and write down the third time you reached out.
Yep.
Because that's what the client relationship management means, is like the relationship is the collection of the communication touch points. And so rare is it that you're going to send one email and there's going to be a check come in for your speech. It's going to be multiple steps, right?
Yeah.
Mark, is there a step at the beginning where you're wanting to identify who's the person I need to talk to?
Yeah. So depending on context, that first email that says, do you book paid speakers? The follow-up email to that, assuming they've responded, is is making sure that this is the right person. So we will say something to the effect of, I can even share these emails, I just have to dig them out, of our CRM, is something to the effect of, we think that you're the right person, or you're the person we found on the website or something. If you're not the right person to talk to, could you please share who that is? Again, the nice thing about associations, if you're in the company or corporate world, it's probably different, is you can always go to the executive director. We always go to the executive director unless there's a conference planner explicitly listed somewhere, because that person will know the right person. If they aren't the right person, they'll know who is. In the school world, I always went to the principal, even though the guidance counselor often would be the person to book it, because I knew that if the principal wasn't the decision maker, they knew who was. And so you're at least one step away versus maybe 3 or 4 steps away if you're reaching out to some random person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. In your experience, and as you've mentored and coached many other speakers, what do you see are the biggest mistakes that you can mention that we could avoid?
In terms of their marketing or their speaking, or just in
Yeah,
general?
let's focus on the marketing and booking speeches.
So the biggest by far is what we've already talked about, is just not keeping track and not following up. So hoping that sending one email with, here's my info, here's my website, that's going to book a gig, is just really wishful thinking, and it's not going to work. You might book one here and there, but you probably won't. So that's the first big thing, is following up matters. And you'll have to figure out what your comfort level is and what your client's feedback is, in terms of finding that line between persistent and annoying. And I think you also have to just straight up be okay with the fact that some people are going to find you annoying. I would rather bother somebody too much and have them say, "Hey, stop emailing me," than miss the gig because they forgot about me. Now, within reason, you don't want to be ridiculous and emailing them 3 times a day, but you have to figure out the cadence. For us, we do the first email goes out a week later, the second email going, if they haven't opened it, going, "Hey, remember me," and then we do 2 weeks after that one if they still haven't responded, with the third one. If they're responding to us, then obviously we go right back and forth right away. But that's the cadence we've found that has gotten the fewest, stop bothering us kind of feedback. So that's a big one. I have found, do as you will, that having someone else email on your behalf has a massive impact on how often your email gets opened. Now, many of us when we're starting don't have somebody else. What you can do is you create another email address, an info at or whatever, from your domain name, assuming you've got a website. So like my website is markblack.ca, so we would have an info at markblack.ca, and the emails go out from that person. And there's a perceived thing about, when you're not, "I'm a speaker, please hire me," but I'm somebody who's helping Mark's team to market Mark to you, all of a sudden Mark seems more legitimate. It's, to me, ridiculous, but it's the reality of, and if you think about it, if you were called Mercedes-Benz, you're not going to talk to the CEO, right? You're going to talk to some gatekeeper, and that's what you would expect because they're a legitimate company, they're a big deal. Well, you want to be a bit of a big deal, right? So have something. So that was a big. We noticed the open rates go up and the response rates go up when we did that. Shorter is better. So the other big takeaway that we learned was, like, multiple paragraph emails do not get read. People are busy. They need you to cut right to the point. Give them links to more information if you want, but you don't be giving them a pile of details. They don't need them until they're interested. Again, mileage will vary. Do what you will. I know other people who say the opposite. We tried cold calling and found that the risk, the time, the ROI didn't make sense. The amount of time it took to try and get somebody, a decision maker, the right person, on the phone, it just didn't make sense. And so we found that email to be much better. Physical mail also sometimes can work really well if you've got a good targeted list and you know who you're going after. And if you're going to do that, I would spend the time to handwrite notes, note cards, postcards, whatever, things that are handwritten. People realize are personalized. They're not, garbage mail, and they work really well. And then there is no better marketing then referral marketing. And so again, that's a chicken and egg thing. When you don't have any bookings, that's useless. But every time you get a booking, you want to try and leverage it into more bookings. And we can talk about that if you like.
Mark, does your sales process happen completely without a phone call, or is it emails that gets to a call that gets to like a verbal handshake and then a proposal, contract, check, and all that?
I'd say I'd say we're about. I don't have specific stats, Majeed, but I would say we probably close 25% of them without ever actually talking to the person, which sounds kind of crazy, but it just that's yep. And but about 75% of the time, the emails get us to the decision maker call, where they want to do something chat interview.
All right. I want to recap. Make a list of the places you want to speak, reach out, follow up, 3 email sequence Mark has, optimize for response. And the ways Mark optimized for response is not being Mark Black. So his assistant sends it or he sends it under an alias. And the biggest mistake that Mark saw was not keeping track and not following up. Okay. I would like to get your impression, Mark, on what do you say to a speaker who says, I want speeches, I want to get booked on speeches, and I want someone else to do it for me.
Yeah, I get it. I was you. So first of all, let's start with that. And I think you can get there. Well, I know you can get there. So now I have a virtual assistant. Jen works for me 10 hours a week, and it'll soon be more. And she works on a flat fee plus commission basis because she also does some other things she helps me with, some administrative things, bookkeeping, and those kinds of things as well. But you cannot train that person to do that work until you know how to do it. Right. So I know tons of people. I was one of them who's like, well, I'm not a salesperson. I don't like to sell myself. But if you want to be a paid professional speaker, you need to learn how to sell yourself. Point blank, period, end of story. If you're uncomfortable with that, you're going to struggle. Now, do we have to be pushy? Absolutely not. You have to figure out a way. You have to do it in your way. You have to do it in a way that's congruent with who you are. But you have to know what your value proposition is. Why should someone book you? And filling a time slot isn't it, because they can do that with tens of thousands of other options. So what makes you different? What makes you valuable? What makes you unique? You need to know those things. Then eventually, once you've got a process and you know the answers to those questions, you can certainly train somebody to at least filter leads in. Like I still close all the bookings. Like I'm the one that closes the deal. My VA helps me to filter the leads until they're a hot lead, and then I'm dealing with them, but I still have to close the deal. And that's again 17 years in. You need to be the person that sells you, because you can't train somebody else to do it until you know how.
There's a question about where do you buy outreach lists that you can trust? And I want to modify the question to how did you build your database of leads?
Yeah, so I would not advise buying a list. I've bought lists. I found them to be rather useless for the most part. I have found very few shortcuts. Occasionally, you can find some shortcuts. Most of the time, it's hunting and pecking and in Google searches and just doing the work. So again, I'm going to use the association market as the example, because that's the world I play in. You can translate this to whatever market you work in. You can use things like today. You can use things like ChatGPT, for example. So if you go into ChatGPT and generate a list of state healthcare associations, for example, it will spit out for you 45, 100, like write more, it'll give you more of them. And that'll give you at least a list of things to then Google, right? And so now you've got a list of associations to search for. And then you go in and you find their website and you find the right person, you fill in the contact info. There is a cool tool called Speaker Engine. So you can Google that if you like. I have no affiliation. I get no commissions. But a very smart speaker, Sam, forgetting his last name, he's a member of NSA. He's has a computer programming background, so he actually created this tool, and essentially it kind of sits on top of Google and helps you create Google searches, Boolean searches, and anyway, I don't get into all of the how it works, but essentially, I think it's a recurring membership thing. I think it's 30 or 40 bucks a month. But if you go into it and use it, what you'll find is you can refine searches in such a way that it will save you a ton of that research time, and you can also it'll also help you find actual email addresses of people, which yeah, name of the tool, Speaker Engine, it's called. It'll help you to find that specific person with their contact info, which is the hardest part of the process. And I think I like the idea of having a target list. You can pick the number, target 50, target 100, target 250. I think any more than that is too many. And you figure out what niche, what market you want to play in, where your expertise fits the best. So for example, my story, as Majeed alluded to, heart lung transplant, marathon runner, I spend a lot of time in healthcare for obvious reasons. That's where my story resonates really well. So I'm going to look for healthcare associations. Now I do other stuff. I spoke to some engineering association for the oil industry in June, but my target in terms of my marketing is in that very niched area. And then other things that come in, that's great. And so I'm always looking for what are healthcare associations who are having events. And that's where I'm doing my research, and that's how I'm building my list. And those are the people that we're proactively reaching out to. And then again, when you book something, so let's say I've booked the Ontario Nurses Association and I've done that speech and it went well. The next thing I'm going to do, as soon as I get back and get some feedback from the client, is I'm reaching out to the other 9 provincial nurses associations to say, hey, Mark just spoke at this Ontario association. It went really well. Here's the feedback we got. You might like to have him at your provincial association. And then that has generated tons of leads that have ultimately turned into bookings as well. Getting those referrals is hugely valuable.
Great tactic. So after speaking at an event, find other events similar to that. In this case, if you're speaking at a provincial association, then find the other provincial associations and let them know you just spoke there, because that's a way for them to easily say, oh, well, if they brought him on, he's probably pretty good. So they've done their vetting process. So that kind of reduces my headache of figuring out if this guy's legitimate. It's a nice tactic there, Mark. Thank you.
Yeah. So Majeed, if you give me do we have a second? I'm going to dive a little deeper on that one, if that's cool.
Yeah, totally.
So this is again a tactic I learned from another speaker. It works brilliantly. And so it goes like this. So you speak at the Ontario Nurses Association. Goes great. You ask them for we used to ask them for a referral letter on letterhead. We don't do that anymore because what's the point? I used to ask them for emails. That'll work fine. I now use a post-event survey that generates the feedback that we want. So whatever mechanism you want is fine. So we get that. I then send an email that says, hey, I get most of my business via referral. It would be awesome if you would send this to some of your colleagues, because they're going to receive an email or communication from you much more readily than they will from me. They'll open it, etc. But I know you're busy. Would it be okay if I sent this to the other organizations on your behalf? And you have to kind of, I found you have to do a little bit of explaining because they're not quite sure what you're talking about. But I will do that. So then I will take this and I will print the email or the letter, whatever they've given me, and I will physically mail that email, that letter, that whatever, to all of those other people with the return address of the person who wrote it. Okay, so it's coming from them, not coming from me. So I did this with FFA, Future Farmers of America, a state organization in the US. They have a chapter in virtually every state. I'd done one of the state conferences, got a letter from them. In that case, it was an actual letter sent on PDF, printed the letter, sent the letter to the other 48 states or 47 states that actually had organizations in their state from this person, this gentleman who hired me. And in the course of the next 18 months, we booked 7 speeches of other state conferences. And the best one was a guy called me and he literally said, I don't know who you are, never heard of you before, But if this guy thinks you're good, then you must be good. Can you make it to our state association? Now, I could have banged on that door for a year and gotten nowhere because I'm just a speaker trying to sell myself. But because his colleague was saying Mark's good, hire him, it went right to him and boom, and we sold it. Like the conversation was, it wasn't a sales conversation. It was, can we book you?
Amazing. So I think some of the questions we can ask ourselves from this example is, how do we make ourselves more referable? How do we make it easier for someone to refer us? In this case, Mark said, just give me permission. I'll do the referral stuff for you. The physical mail stuff is about getting people's attention. It's not easier to send it physically by the mail, but it's more effective than sending off those emails. Thank you so much for sharing that. Mark, what is the Resiliency Roadmap, your upcoming book?
It is. So I'm just grabbing it. There it is. It's here. It's here. So I did this I say I did it backwards. You can do it whichever direction you want. Most people would write the book and then create a speech from the book. I created the speech and then elaborated on it to create the book. And it's a 7-step process for how to go from where you are to where you want to be. How do you transform rather adversity into a competitive advantage? And so I took my journey of going from transplant to marathon, and then interestingly enough, COVID presented an amazing business case study for this process as well, that turns out it works really well in business too. How do you go from a speaker who makes all their living standing in front of live audiences, and then COVID happens and you go, holy shit, what am I going to do? And and I created this 7-step framework for how you do that, and then elaborated from the speech to the book. And so it's a 7-step process for how to take whatever your problems are, and I put those in quotation marks because that's a mindset issue, and transform them not into just something you survive, but something that actually gives you an advantage in the world. Because I think that we are who we are, not in spite of, but because of the things that have challenged us.
So resiliency, I gather it's kind of your one word that you've claimed through your message.
Yes.
And I remember being in the Association of Professional Speakers being so envious of the people with one word, because I had like a 2-column list of words. I could speak on this and that and that. And here's Mark Black, resiliency.
Yeah.
Michael Hughes, networking.
Mm-hmm.
JJ Brune, communication.
Mm-hmm.
That one word. What's the word? So yours is resiliency. Now you got the resiliency roadmap. And my guess is you have a keynote called Resiliency Roadmap. And when people walk into the conference room, there's a book on their chair.
Bingo. That's in fairness, this got into my hands like June 11th. So I've had one keynote since the book's been available. But yes, the idea is when we pitch a client, so once they're interested, we say, okay, here are the 3 options for bringing Mark in. We call it sweet spot pricing. Comes from another NSA speaker whose name will come to me in a minute. But essentially the idea is we give them option A, B, and C. Option B is where they land most of the time. And so option A doesn't include books. Option B includes a few, I think. Option C includes books for everybody. And so we try and pre-sell them. If that doesn't work, then I just offer them for sale to individuals at the back of the room afterwards.
Great.
I see somebody saying, why would someone pay you to speak at a conference? Which is an interesting question. Because they need material, they need content, right? And they will pay you for a couple of different reasons. So the reason most of us will get booked is because they need content. The reason that sometimes people will get booked is because they're actually going to put butts in seats. So if you're really well known in your niche area, you're a celebrity in that little space, then they might book you because your name is going to sell registrations to the conference. You see this at bigger events where they bring in an athlete or some big celebrity, and it's not so much because of what that person's going to say. It's because their name and their picture on the website is going to get people to register for the event. Again, for us, it's probably going to be more about, you're going to entertain the audience, you're going to provide them value, and ultimately you're going to make them register to come back next year, right? So people don't come back to an event And this is one of the lines I use when I'm negotiating speaking fees with event planners. People are not going to come back to your event next year because you had a great dinner. People are going to come back because the content and the experience was great, and the speaker is part of delivering a great event and creating a great experience. And so that's why they will pay. And look, if you have the mindset of like, why would they do that? Do some research and check some things out, and you're going to see not only will they do that, but you would be shocked at what people get paid to do that. People that you do not know, that are not celebrities, that you've never heard of, are making tens of thousands of dollars per speech in some cases when they're really well known in their market.
Carla, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question in a different way?
Yeah. Hi, Mark.
Hi.
Thanks. Really, really great talk. I'm learning really a lot and get inspired a lot also. So, and Majeed, thank you for providing this. Yeah, we all have a niche. Like I have stress and personal development. So it's basically there are a lot of different subjects I could speak about. So there are different events. So one might be more for the stress, the other more for the personal development, a third one that I could touch like mindset. Would it be a good one for searching then all those different fields like healthcare you were talking about? That would be the nurses in healthcare nowadays. I just got asked to join one of those organizations. So is it a good thing then to look at those different places? Because you said it's about 250 places, your list, and so make that different.
Yeah, I mean, so what I would say, what I advise my clients, my coaching clients to do is think about a Venn diagram, right? Those interlocking circle diagrams. And you think about people that you like to work with. Now, if you don't know who that is yet, then you have to do some experimenting, but like people that you're passionate about helping, people who have a budget for what you do, so they're going to pay you, and people who would benefit from your expertise. And like where do those circles intersect? And those are going to be your people. You also can think about what's your past experience, right? So I landed in healthcare not because I've worked in healthcare, but because my story is a healthcare story. And so that is naturally going to resonate more with that audience. And I always suggest to my clients, you want a niche because it's going to make your marketing, you're going to get more bang for your buck with your marketing, right? We're not Coca-Cola and Nike. We can't afford to effectively market to the world. We need to pick a spot and market to that spot. But if other things come from other areas that we can legitimately, and that's important, legitimately say, yes, I can help, then we're not going to turn those away. We're just not going to spend our time marketing to all of these different places because we can't effectively do that. How do you pick that niche? I think you make a decision, because we can debate it forever. Well, is this one better than that one? Pick, try it. And if you try it for 3 months and you're not getting any mileage, okay, then maybe I try a different one. But you've got to kind of make a decision and go all in, at least for a period of time, and test it before you decide to do something else. I think it's very easy to do the analysis paralysis and just not make a decision because you're afraid of cutting off opportunity.
Yeah. Mark, thank you so much. For people who want to continue to learn from you and learn more about your coaching program for speakers and get your book and learn more, where should they go?
markblack.ca. Super simple. All the info is there, and my speaking stuff is there. The pop-up for the book is there. Coaching is there. It's all there. So, and then social media, I am Mark Black on all the platforms.
markblack.ca for Canada.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mark Black. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Have a good week.
Bye, folks.
Thank you for listening to the Expert Speaker Podcast. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and leave us a rating so that more people can discover the Expert Speaker Podcast, and so more people can be empowered to share their message. Be sure to go to www.expertspeaker.com and take the masterclass to learn how to grow your business and make money speaking. It's totally free and will change your business. If you're ready to work with Expert Speaker, you can apply. Just go to expertspeaker.com/apply, and someone from our team will be in touch with you to help you grow your business with public speaking. That's expertspeaker.com/apply. We'll see you in the next episode.